for me, I'm like, how do you get in the right program? Because just because you're advanced at Pilates or you're advanced in cycling does not make you advanced under heavy load.
Hey guys, so welcome to another episode of the First Optimal Podcast. Really excited. We have Hailey Babcock joining us today, and she is a women's health expert in the space. We're going to get into it today. She's collaborated with a lot of the thought leaders in the space, from exercise physiology to nutrition to the medical side, and as well as many, many other health coaches that follow a lot of her practices or learn from her. So we're honored to have you on and share a lot of your knowledge here in this time. So appreciate you taking the time out and sharing this with us. But yeah,
Thank you.
welcome to the podcast. So,
Thank you. I'm excited.
but I always love to start with this. Maybe our audience is like, we know what Joe's going to say, but I just think it's so interesting. We were talking before the recording. I talked a little bit about what I do and how I got into it, which no one cares about because they've all heard it a million times. But I do like to ask the guests, like, what, just kind of talking about how did you get started in this? It's easy to see somebody, like when I came across content already established, all these different options and tools and great resources and great content for people. But it's got to start somewhere, right? And so I'm just curious to how, we know where you are today, but like, where did it all start, and what fuels your passion today?
So I was always really active growing up. So that I've always had that in my blood. Along with that, I kind of fell into the Ironman space. I moved to Boulder, Colorado in 2007, and it's kind of hard to live here and not do triathlon and be a big
Oh yeah.
cyclist. So kind of fell into that and did that for about a decade. Um, all the way through my 30s, and I was living back east at the time. I did my last half Ironman that I was ever going to do, which I didn't know at the time. But in, let's see, when I was 41, and ended up getting like this knee issue that kind of nobody really knew what was happening. It was my hamstring, and then it was knee, and then blah blah. Fast forward to 9 months later, and I had this major knee surgery where I was non-weight bearing for 6 weeks, which to somebody who'd just months before been training and completed a really um, challenging 70.3 course is really hard to say. You're going to lay in bed for 6 weeks. You can crutch around on one leg, but you can't even really tap your toe down on this other leg. And so I took that. I'm not a big TV watcher. I think I watched one movie when I had the surgery, and I went down this rabbit hole. I had been teaching Pilates, and obviously I was fit. But I hadn't really been adding strength training in because I was swim, bike, run all the
Mm.
time. And then Pilates when I wasn't doing that. So I got certified as a trainer at 41, and I ended up just kind of spending the 6 weeks getting my certification, and literally read every book that I could and watch every YouTube, and just really found some people in the space that aligned with what I wanted to do. And that was kind of the start of where I wanted to go. Now, fast forward 9 months from there, and it's the pandemic, and we decide to move back to Boulder. And so everyone was home. Nobody had anything to do. I always wanted to have online content, but I just didn't have time to do it.
Hmm.
And so I started just putting out like these TRX videos because my clients all at the time wanted something to do. And that kind of took off. I got a decent following really fast over those 3 months because it was just that you could get a TRX, but you couldn't get into a gym. Gym equipment was pretty much out of stock.
Oh
And
yeah.
so everyone had that, but you could still get a TRX. So I did that, but I knew I didn't want to be pigeonholed into this TRX bucket, which I kind of started to do. And at the time, this was like 2021, I found this a mentor that lived in Australia, and everything was still kind of like some things were open, some things weren't. Australia was still shut down, and so I took a bunch of his courses, and it really changed my thinking and how I wanted to approach this. And he's super super smart, and so I kind of just had him start mentoring me, and I asked him in the fall of 2021, do you want to do this fat loss course for women specifically, because everything that you're teaching me I want to be able to teach to them, and I know that's not getting I guess passed down. I knew at 41, while I had been active my whole life and I knew I had professional coaches and all of this, so I knew a lot, that there was no way I was going to ever get a master's or a PhD in this. But if I was going to start an app and give this a go, I needed to have the best people, and that wasn't going to be me. So I feel like from that time, from late 2021, kind of fast forward to where I am now, I just started really hand selecting people that I wanted to have come in. And I'm like, okay, I have the audience, I have the app, I can get the people in, but I want the top line information for women specifically, what's going on. And I formed some relationships there. If I look at um let's see, fall of 2023, I had done a couple of Instagram lives with Stacy, that's it. We had a good rapport, good vibe, but like talk to her once a year when I asked her if she wanted to do this Instagram live. And I just sent this email that sat in my inbox for months to her, and I didn't dare press send. And because I was getting asked then, I was like, well, would you have a program that Stacy Sims would recommend? And I just got up the guts and I sent this email to her, and it was crickets for like a month. And I was like, well, okay, she's too busy, she's probably doing something. And then one day out of the blue, she's like, sure, let's do it. And that was I think in November, and I in January of 2024 was down there in New Zealand writing this program with her, and then we launched it in March, and it was literally like my business exploded overnight. I couldn't it was crazy. Like I couldn't answer enough emails. I couldn't, I was just like drowning and had to hurry and compile a team because so many people came into my web all at once. So I guess if there's anything that's kind of unique about my story, it's shoot your shot. And I always tell my kids that, because one email changed the trajectory of my life, my business life, of kind of where I am today. So yeah, lesson learned there.
No, that's great. And I think that's what I was going to ask you because and I'm glad you layered that in there because if there's coaches out there, people trying to help others, and how do they go from that start to that point. But I also think it's important to note that like the best educators I've met and ran into are the ones that know what they don't know to a degree and know how to find the experts to pull them in. Because it's just like, yeah, I know this, but I have this friend or I have this person that they have a PhD in this. Like they
Yeah.
study their whole life to like this one topic. I'm going to go ahead and defer to them. And it's, I think it just says a lot about the overarching vision you have for what you're trying to do, as well as, there's just a lot of people that are having a lot of success online and they're helping people get healthy. It starts to boost the ego a little bit. And then it's all about them. Where if you look at your content and your team, you have multiple different experts with different specialties, which is why one of the reasons why I want to have you on. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's good stuff. And then I was going to also mention, because it triggered a little squirrel moment in my brain, but I actually did. I never, the most I trained for was a sprint distance triathlon, but I got exhausted watching a full Ironman. I remember that. I was in Madison, Wisconsin, and watched one, and was like, "This is tiring." And like the people I knew that were doing it, I'm like, "I wonder how they feel." Um, but I definitely can appreciate the workload it takes to prepare for the triathlons, and what I experienced personally, which was interesting, is I did a lot of strength sports earlier, and like powerlifting. I did strongman, all that fun stuff. and I ended up getting a knee injury actually, probably because my technique was terrible. But in training for triathlons, it's all the repetitive motion with swim specifically. It's actually a whole nother story I won't get into because the podcast is about you, not about me. But so I met my wife, where my boss was like, "You're really bad at swimming. You should go take some lessons." And my wife worked at the same place I did, and yeah, something about her scolding me from the pool deck just, was love
Oh,
at first sight, I
swimming's the
guess.
worst.
Oh yeah,
Swimming is the worst. Every time I'd be like, "Please, please, please." I would give $1,000,000 to not be at the start line and have to do the swim. Cancel the swim.
yes.
I can do everything else.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No,
tough.
it's tough, and she's coached for years, and actually our oldest daughter now is in swim. Right when she retired from coaching, my oldest daughter starts, which is funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was definitely ticked because after our first date, we had our next training session, and she's like, "Ready, go." And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna sit here." Like, I was like, it's changed now. Sorry. She's like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, she had me flying, doing, tons of laps and flip turns, as really get my stroke down, all that. And she's like, "I
Ugh,
worked so hard to get you to this point, and now it's all gone." I'm like, "Yeah, sorry, honey."
sorry, me too. I haven't stepped in the pool since after my knee surgery, and that's all I could do. I was like, "I don't need to do this anymore." It's
It's
great for people that love it,
I will
but I
say,
never
because
did.
I wrestled in high school, and it's the second hardest sport. The only reason why I would say wrestling's harder is you have another guy trying to slam you basically if you get tired.
Yeah,
But like, you can't back off and swim, and it's like counterintuitive. As you get tired, you have to relax more and extend more. Where in every other sport you tense more.
yeah,
It's just, yeah, yeah. So anyways, all kinds of fun memories from that. But
yeah.
it does give you some adjustments to your training program. And I know, yeah, Colorado's beautiful. I know a lot of people that are out there, and back one of the companies I was at in the health industry, they own a events thing, and they have a bunch of rides they do out there, and a bunch of, I forgot what it's called now, but they have their own brand of triathlons, and like a cycle in the mountains and all kinds of cool stuff. So
Yeah.
good to mix it up. But
Mhm.
no, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, and I wanted to just get into a little bit of, you know, as far as your approach to women's health. I think the first thing I wanted to unpack is, what are you seeing in the questions or people you're engaging with? What is the mentality, say, in the last year or two when women are coming in? Is it one of overwhelmed, confused? Is it, I'm ready to go, I feel empowered, like there's enough good information out there? Is it, I'm defeated? Like, what are you seeing, just as if you're to paint with a broad brush, just kind of women trying to get healthy and fit today? What's the market like?
I think it's I don't know where to start.
Mhm.
And even women that I say a lot of women have done some kind of strength training. And so they think, well, I'm not a brand new beginner because I've done these, dumbbell less meals classes and I've done F45 and Orange Theory and I've done these programs. As you know, as a power lifter, true progressive strength training is a different animal.
Mhm.
And the thing that I see most at women that I only let me say this, I only work with midlife women because
Mhm.
I'm one. When I came on the space, and it's not because my programs only work for midlife women.
Sure.
It's not because they're sex specific necessarily. I mean, there are some biases that women prefer more than men, but honestly, it's the fact that these I only wanted to work with people in my age. Like the 20
Mhm.
year olds, there's 9 million influencers that they
Right.
can go to. And so I wanted to be like, what am I experiencing? And what are these women experiencing that I'm training in person? And what do they need? And so I built my community around the age range for that reason. How do I bring in experts that talk about this age group for that reason? Not because it only works, because as you know, a lot of the same overload methods and the training plans and the moves are all going to be similar,
Mhm.
um, if not identical, but it really is this I guess women coming into this where they're sitting in midlife, they're probably stressed out, they're dealing with aging parents, they have really troubled teens potentially, they're getting divorced, they're leading corporate companies now. So there's not a lot of women that I say are just cold kicking it. that have
Right.
oodles of time, and we try to serve everyone else. So when
Yep.
that happens, then we take the back seat, and then as we age, we're the ones that are living longer than men, and we're the
Mhm.
ones that have poor bone density and are dealing with this. Even though we live longer, what's our quality of life like? So
Yeah.
that's kind of I think women are there's plenty of great uh thought leaders in the space, a lot who I have partnered with and I bring onto my courses, but regardless of whether they're getting the information, they know, okay, I need to do something to protect my muscle and my bone density. And so that message is loud and clear. The path to that is very different in reality when you've trained, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of women on my platform now. You start to see common themes. And
Yeah.
so I think most women are like, what do I do? And for me, I'm like, how do you get in the right program? Because just because you're advanced at Pilates or you're advanced in cycling does not make you advanced under heavy load.
Mm.
So, yeah, for me, I feel, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent now, but I
Oh,
feel a tremendous amount of responsibility because even these, I could partner with anyone, and I've partnered with many, many, many different experts in the space. What they're saying is true, but when we bring it together, you cannot skip steps in this. And so as women, we want to be like, okay, well, I can go to A to Z. You can't. It takes time. And if you don't get in the right program, I don't want get people getting injured, women getting injured on my watch because it will set you back potentially for months and months if you get into this too fast, too quick.
yeah, no, you said there's a lot of good points in that to kinda unpack that I'm sure a lot of people resonate with, and, like, one of the thoughts I was processing as you're talking is I got in the exercise science space in probably, like, the 2000s, and I remember, I was at a big corporate gym and very well known now, but there was that cutoff, like, the carpet and the Mondo floor, we called it, where it was, like, the women right where the carpet rubbed off, that's where they stopped. Maybe there's a few
Yep.
machines, maybe an ab machine, inner outer thigh, and then all the cardio,
Yeah.
or like the group fitness with like 3-pound weights, like the pink
Mhm.
weights, right? And then though, as it kind of progressed, and then CrossFit came out, and then it was like you start seeing a little more of that, and you start seeing different, like you mentioned, like the boutique boom that happened probably 2010-ish, 12-ish,
Mhm.
maybe. And that, so I think and now it's so funny because I say this to guys a lot is like, women out train us in the gym now, guys. Like, and a lot of their training, I'm again speaking general, but a lot of the training they do actually more men need to do. Like I was kind of joking with some friends I know about my own personal training. Um, I modeled more of a I want Brett Contreras, does a lot of content, for glutes and all that. And so
Yeah.
I like took dusted off some of my old textbooks and knowledge on that, and then also used a cheat code by going through some of his stuff and put together my own for like lower back, glute, and hamstring. Just, growing up as a male in the,
Yeah.
in the early stages, it was a lot of pressing and all that, which obviously for years I've been trying to undo those imbalances I created from overtraining and that. But it is really, it's cool to see women transitioning there, but I do find that there seems to be this like invisible line around, if you were born in 85 and back, it's this weights make me bulky, I don't go on the weights, like, indoctrination that happened, and now there's this change, and then obviously there's a lot of other changes which is a little different, but like the black box warning being removed from all the women's health initiative study and all that finally is getting fixed. It sounds like from a more broader scale, and there's a lot more education on creatine use for women and strength training and all, and I'm sure we're going to know all this. Um, are you seeing more of a transition there? Do you feel like it's headed in the right direction as far as these health tools, these approaches? Clearly, you have a great approach, but broader scale, when you look across what's going on in the industry, is it starting to head in better direction, would you say, for women's health? Or
I think so. Because these experts and again that are out in the space, the menopause movement is massive. And when these women collectively have 10 million followers between 3 or 4 of them, it's a big movement. And so a lot of women are getting the message. Thank goodness. I might be a little bit clouded because I think in my web, everyone knows this, but even from the women that are coming into my education courses, from the time I started in 2021, we were preaching what everyone seems to know now. You have to eat protein at every meal. What? I
yeah,
didn't know that. Creatine for women? What's creatine? I've
right,
never heard of that.
right.
Resistance training and mixing that with high intensity interval sessions and what zone 2 is, no one knew what this was. I knew what it was because I'd been in the endurance background, so I knew the cardiovascular words and the terminology and all of that, but now it seems like most women, they might be confused because someone says this and then another person says this about the same thing, but they are familiar, most of them are familiar with the wording that's out there. So everyone pretty much knows high protein, get a DEXA scan. We know we need to be lifting weights, which is this. There's this influx, especially in the last 2 years, of women coming into the weights room, which is so exciting. It's about time. So I feel like that message is getting out there. Of course, there's still women that will think that they're going to get bulky, and to be honest, some of them kind of look a little bulky when they finally figure out their path, but at first they might say I feel bulky. Well, that might be true, but that might be because we need to shed a little bit of fat because you
Sure.
just put on muscle to your already like if you had some fat to lose. So those things all come into play. Usually there's a good answer for everything.
Yeah, no, it's I've seen a lot of that too, because like the three I've seen, which you hit on, which I think the biggest is, you know, just most people I think agree on this is protein in women's health, what's lacking, then fiber, then I've seen a mixture of the third one. Some is hydration, some say it's other things. But um I recall like, a lot of this stuff has been out there, but they just, to your point, they didn't have the amplified effect of these brilliant content creators. Like you take like a Dr. Gabrielle on, like she studied under Don Layman, and he did a lot of early study on essentially what it was. And I'm going to speak it in Joe terms, not his terms, but he did a study on like women's minimum threshold of protein.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably heard of it. And as time went on, right, like as a percent of their total calories, it was enough to get them to this point. But as we know, as we age, the hunger signaling goes down and metabolism goes down, and their percent of protein was the same, but that was going down to where, let's say it was 100 grams you need a day just to stay healthy.
Mhm.
And it was showing that drop off, that like that's why at least my theory is, in that midlife phase, when if you're not keeping up with the caloric percent from protein, you have to be more conscious and think of that more, to where, I don't know, I don't want to compare, but I guess like I think men just kind of gravitate to maybe more proteins, and this is a whole nother issue because they probably have way too much fat and all that other stuff. But the protein piece, it seems like it does drop off. But at least there's some people out there that are championing this, obviously yourself as well, to kind of understand the importance of that. And it's not, because I used to hear it a lot, especially from women in the family, like, well, I don't want to look like you. I don't want to be like super big and fall. And it's like, no, 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 this is general health. Like I recall reading a study, it was probably late 90s, and it was the number one uh, predictive indicator of assisted living or not was if the subject did resistance training, in there between like 40 and 60 or something like that. I'm probably botching the ages, but it's kind
Yeah.
of in that range. And that was the number one. And it's like, oh, so, fun little, you just an interesting little factoid there. And so you look at protein and resistance training, and it's like, no, no, no. I think more women are adopting it. Obviously, a lot more. We still have to unclutter the mess, because let's call it what it is. Like the industry, from a medical and from a health standpoint, has been so male dominant, or male educators.
Mhm.
I don't think it's inherently bad or they have bad intentions. I just think that's just the reality of what it was. And now it's shifting more so that more women can get the right good information specific to them, which is hence why we wanted to have you on. So, um, I wanted to use that to transition, I guess, a little bit more into what is different with women. And when you're approaching their resistance training, I understand a lot of it would work, I'm sure, for men, but are you seeing different things that maybe, hey, you can't just take your husband or your significant other's program and just slap it and just go, like as far as like, are there different approaches you're seeing with like midlife women to start the foundations approach that you have and some of those things?
For strength training?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry for
For
strength
strength
training. Yeah.
training? Yeah. So I had my husband try one of my first programs and I've co-wrote 75% of my programs. The other 25% I wrote myself, but like I said, I never, ever, ever have to be the smartest in the room. I don't want to be. I won't. And so I've really reached out to incredible program design writers and people that all have PhDs or are just medical physicians that could help me along this path. But when I first did when he did one of my programs, he's like, there's too much butt stuff in there and not enough chest and biceps. So are there differences? For sure.
Hmm.
Women care more about like adductors, inner thighs, and glutes and shoulders and stuff like that. So there are biases towards it. So my programs definitely bias a female. We do work a lot on balance. So a lot of my foundations, you'll see me and people are always like, why are you working out in socks all the time? And there's a couple of reasons for that. You would know for the heavy lifting or you don't want to be in like this Hoka shoe that's
Right.
super padded. But then also to work on the foot stabilizers, again, women are living longer, so we need strong bones and we need balance and we need speed and power. So while those things might be similar to men, I only work with women. So I honestly, I'm kind of negligent on exactly what works for guys. I mean, I could guess, but
Sure.
sure, I'm sure there's a few differences, no question.
Yeah, no, and are there certain like imbalances or weaknesses you're seeing a lot with women when they're coming in? Is there like when you're starting to work with them, are you finding for those who have been exercising before they come in, is there things you kind of have to unpack or maybe perhaps well, let me just pause there because I have some other follow-up questions and I'll get ahead of myself. But is there anything you have to like unpack, unlearn, untrain either the
Oh yeah.
physiology and yeah, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, I'm sure that this is similar to men too. But again, I only work with women, so I only know the women statistics. The hip hinge is the hardest move to teach. So
Mm,
when women are like, I can't do the back extension or RDLs or deadlifts hurt my back, guarantee that I know exactly why that is happening. And so that's a hard movement. Most women are super great at running and squatting and things like that. So the squat necessarily isn't the issue, but it's more of the hip hinging. That would be number one. The rotator cuff is more I know it happens in men too, but just from the female orthopedic surgeons that I work with, they see more females
mm,
postmenopausal because estrogen is an anti-inflammatory. So once
mhm,
that exits the building, we're just at risk for more of these tendinopathies. So shoulder scapular movement, proper scapular movement would be number two, and that comes with a weak rotator cuff. That comes with the scapula not that they're not moving correctly because of the frankly because of breast mass in the front, and that's obviously there's not something opposing that in the back, so
mm.
it causes this pec minor to be short
Yeah.
and all of these are more women specific for sure. That is I've never met a female that has completely all the rotator cuff muscles and the serratus anterior are firing as strong as they should be in relation to the big prime movers. Biggest issue that I see across the board.
Yeah, no, that's great. We haven't really talked about that much on the podcast. That's a really good point. With how do you tackle that virtually or through like an app platform and I know I'm sure videos and stuff like that, but I'm just curious, like teaching the hip hinge, teaching how to get better recruitment and activation. I know we're painting with a broad brush and there's probably some individual adjustments you need to make, but
Yeah.
what is like an overarching kind of theme or how do you do that?
Well, I have a foundations course that I am preaching all the time because I think you can find lifting courses, heavy lifting, hypertrophy. You can find that. I think again because I had help in writing most of mine that mine are s- incredibly done incredibly well, but you could kind of find that in a lot of different as the consumer, you don't know. They don't know if a program is super balanced and if the muscles are super balanced and all of that. They don't know. And
Mm,
so there you're kind of just guessing. My foundations course, I would say, is my number one program outside of the Power Collection. That would be where I would send women first. And then with that program comes a foundations webinar where we break down with my mentor who wrote these courses with me. We break down all of these common injuries and why they happen, what to look for, what to strengthen more. And then I have the same, like a different webinar that's breaking down the back squat and breaking down the deadlift. Those
very
are the
cool.
biggest movers. Could we do breaking down the bench press? Probably, but most women don't really care that much about the bench press. We still do it because we need a balanced body, but no one is like going in pushing hard for extra chest days.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, that is how I handle it on a broad scale. And then also with a lot of my premium courses or premium workout plans, there's access to these experts or different experts that I'll bring on where it's just Q&As, rapid
Yeah.
Q&A, where these people, these women get to have potentially have their question answered by these people, these women that they really look up to and get to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, as far as like percent of I want to get a little bit into some of the programming. As far as like, would you say, how do I phrase it? Are you spending a higher percentage of time working on what one could assume, like in a foundations course, one could assume is going to be an imbalance for most women, like you mentioned, some of the upper back and shoulders being fluctuated. Like, are you putting more load or more work in those areas, as well as, glute, hamstring development, things like that? Like, how does that unpack, like as far as the imbalances, like approaching those in those foundations in your foundations program?
Yeah. So my foundations programs, I have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. They're all 9 weeks in duration. They could easily be pressed to 12. But honestly, the question that I get on the daily is I don't want to lose the hard earned muscle. And I'm
Sure.
like, try the foundations course first. And if you're working to effort, there's nothing that says that you're going to lose muscle. Max strength, maybe a small percentage, but this is not months and months that you're focusing on this. It's maybe 6 to 9 weeks. And then from there, we really pepper in that the goal of a foundations is not only to build up the weak links and balance muscle symmetry, but it's also to not detrain some of those bigger movement patterns. We just might do a little bit more unilateral work in a couple of weeks and then bring back in some of the compound lifts by the end. So again, that is only something that I tell women to do once a year, and then they're slightly peppered into all of my other max strength, speed and power, hypertrophy programs. You'll see them as like the accessory work occasionally here and there. Now, I tell women if you notice, like for me, it's always my left shoulder. So I have to pepper those in more. And obviously, that's not going to be the same for everyone. So they have
Sure.
to pay attention in that foundation phase. And if they know, holy cow, my hamstrings are so incredibly weak and I've been having this knee pain, it's starting to get a little bit better, you might have to do more hamstring stuff in the future programs even if it's not programmed in, just to keep yourself really well balanced.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask a couple other questions about that. Gosh, there's so many things when you're talking. So that's great. It's all great stuff. I wanted to ask about tempo, um, and rep ranges, like in a foundations approach. Do you prescribe a specific tempo? And then after I guess we answer that, we can define these things for those who might not know what those some of those terms mean. And then like rep ranges, rest periods, all that. Is that different in like a foundations phase versus some of your other phases, if you will?
Yes, so there's no speed and max strength
Sure.
in a foundations program, so it's going to be more in that strength, endurance, and hypertrophy rep range. So you'll see anything from 8 reps to 20 reps
Okay.
in that. And then the tempo is pretty standard 2010 or 3010, 3110, something like that. But there's not anything that has like an X in there that I use for power, like come up
Yeah.
as fast as you
Best you
can.
can. Sure.
So those are found in my other programs, but and I think that's where women are like, well, I've been working on max strength. As a power lifter, you can't do the same thing all year
Sure.
round for years and years, especially women coming in that are starting online. So they don't have physical eyes on them and they're trying to just work through it and be their own kind of trainer with a online trainer, but that's not, again, eyes on them. Again, the risk versus reward for lifting heavy all the time or trying to hit these run 1 rep maxes all the time is a recipe for injury, frankly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we never do it. It doesn't mean, but it has to be strategic. And it definitely is not something that I would recommend and that any of my programs promote year round.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Can you, just for those out there, can you walk through, I forget what the numbers were, but if it was like a 3101 or
Tempo.
yeah,
I know that's where it gets confusing.
can you explain to those out there that may not know what that mean? Like, what does that mean?
Okay, so tempo is the time that we move weights. And so if I were to take a squat, so everyone picture a squat, the first number is always the eccentric or
Mhm.
the late the lowering,
Mhm.
not always the lowering because the overhead I mean there's definitely the pull down would be the rising. But if we look at the squat without getting into a lot of terminology, because then it starts to get away from us, it would
Sure.
be 3 seconds lowering into a squat. If the second number is a 1, it's a 1 second pause at the bottom of that squat, wherever your lowest range of motion safely is. The next number would be a 1, which would mean 1 second to come back up out of the squat. And then the 0 at the end means you're not pausing for 1 second. You're just kind of going right back
Put that
into it.
down.
So, yeah, I mean, you can play around with those numbers, but that first number is always the eccentric movement.
Right.
So if we looked at the pull down, it would actually be on the way up. So I
Mhm.
always try to say it's in the part where you would like where you would most likely not get stuck.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to get stuck going down into a squat. I'm going to get stuck trying to come back up after I've hit the bottom. I have a video explaining that, but that's the hardest thing for women that aren't familiar with those numbers and they come in and they're like, "Well, what's the eccentric and when is it the concentric?" And now this move is this. So we always put the eccentric first, and once you get that in each move, then it's easy to remember, but yeah, it can be a little confusing.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense because they have to think of the joint, like, is it shortening or lengthening? And it's like, yeah, that's why they hire
Yeah.
coaches and trainers like yourself to do the thinking on that. But I have noticed like years ago, it was a motor skill development course we did, and there was some studying we did at went to school in Wayne State in here in Detroit, Michigan, and a lot of the uh, just for those out there, like obviously you have the credentials and the backing, but from the eccentric phase in foundations does help a lot with that. You know, the term we used to use back then, I don't know if it's used in the fitness industry, but it was like neuromuscular efficiency, like the signaling, if you will, of getting those muscles to contract. So I've done a lot of that with like weak point training back in the day personally, to overload that phase to help
Yeah.
train the body control. And I only bring that up because I think if women mimic guys, so I'm gonna pick on the guys, we want to lift more. We want to look cool and strong. So we're not going to go as slow and eccentric because it's putting a lot of load and fatigue on the muscle.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to build a foundations, it's almost like you're trying to get ready to actually like do the cool stuff. I call it cool stuff, but it's all cool. But to do the cool stuff you want to do. Oh, I saw this
Yeah.
person doing squatting like a beast and doing, plyos and all. It's like, yeah, but spend, as you mentioned, like phases in these foundations to build the right recruitment, the right signaling, just get everything kind of teed up to go and do that. You're like progressive, we call it, everyone knows the term progressive overload, or they've heard it, or they can Google it, and conceptually it makes sense. I'm
Yeah.
progressively overloading the muscle, but like, get your body ready to be able to handle that, the tendons, ligaments, all those little stabilizing muscles, the transmitters to kind of balance things. Um, so you know a lot better than I do, but I just wanted to put a little more of an explanation point on those tempos and the importance of that. And I think that's why, again, I just can't recommend enough people look into programs like yours and look at it as, you know, um, just exercising is great. You're off the couch, you're moving, you're going to get benefits from it. But man, it is a force multiplier if you have the right program. And we
Mhm.
know, like, we're all busy, but especially as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, like with women, and a lot of the women I talk to, and when my family, it's like they have such big hearts. They're such amazing people, but society's changed a lot to where they're supposed to be super fit mom, super mom,
Yeah.
super businesswoman. And oh, by the way, you have these other giant children called men like me, they gotta help keep us out of trouble because we're boneheads without you guys. Um, and then, they're more nurturing typically, and they're gonna be more putting others in front of them to generally, like if you look at it on a broad scale. So as you mentioned, like they're gonna put themselves in the back seat. So what goes away is their time, the
Yeah.
effectiveness, or if they get banged up or an injury, or like you said, like a woman saying, "Well, those don't work for me because I hurt my back. And then if you hurt my back, I can't help my kids and I can't do that. I can't." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, it's just because you're doing it wrong. Let's build a foundation." So I think those are all good
Yeah.
points, and it helps overall. Like I often will talk about, or think about how can you take training. To me, is there's a lot of benefits to it, but at its core is like, how can you take in a controlled environment, building the strength and the capacity, so that later, you're getting out of the car, the kids are running around yelling or whatever, and you got your groceries and you got to do the side lunge and step up and there's ice there. It's like
Yeah.
you blow out a knee or a back, right? Or you just little wobble and you grabbed it and you moved on because you've built that phase. And it's, unless you're genetically blessed with some awesome genetics, like you have to train those things. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
um with just kind of with that, taking it from the foundations in mind, how long are these other phases? Can you tell us a little bit about, hey, great job, you did your 9-week foundation, or when are they ready to graduate out of that? Is there, they have to do beginner, intermediate, and advanced foundation typically, or
No.
one? Okay.
Just one, and then I say for anyone that is new to progressive training. So you've gone on a machine and you've done it for 4 weeks and you've lifted more or tried to lift more over that period or with a dumbbell or with barbells. If so for most women, if they've never even touched a barbell or they've only done a couple of machines, you're a beginner, and I would say you are a beginner for a minimum of 9 months. And the rest of that time, I would say put 9 weeks into a foundations phase, and then you're almost pretty much at a year, and then you could go into some intermediate programming. So finding the right level there. For the rest of the remainder of the year, it's really goal specific, but for all women, maybe if you have a goal specific, it looks different for fat loss, putting in a fat loss phase, or if you had like I cycle every year in Europe for a week. So if you have different goals that have to work around something else physically that you're doing, if it's just the female that's like, I want to check all the boxes. I want speed and power, I want max strength, I want hypertrophy, then we look at periodizing that. And I'm pretty much like, I try to do a little bit more max strength than hypertrophy, but not much. Most of my programs vacillate, they go back and forth between 3 weeks of hypertrophy and 3 weeks of max strength. And then the speed programs, speed and power, are in a different program. So then they would do that for 12 weeks and then they could come back. But the max strength and hypertrophy are kind of the ones that we want to focus on because we still have to build lean mass, but we need that speed and power and we need that max strength.
Mhm.
So again, those are also the hardest for most women to get to because you cannot jump into that.
Sure.
And a lot of women have osteoarthritis at this age, so they can't jump, period, the end. Okay, well, can you move weight quicker? Can you move under load quicker if you can still even back squat to a box? Can you work on exploding out of that? There's different ways that we have to look at it because not one training program is going to suit everyone. But ideally, you are doing a good amount of all 3 of those, maybe speed and power and max strength a little bit more than hypertrophy, but honestly not much.
Yeah. And for the women out there, if they don't have like a specific goal that correlates, if their brain doesn't go to like, I want to do speed and power, like what would be the benefits to them if they're like, wait a minute, what speed and power? Like, what is that? Like, how does that work into, a midlife women's protocol? What are the health
Yeah.
benefits? Why not just stick with the weights or stick with my group fitness classes and my bands or whatever the case is?
Mhm. So we need to, for bone health, we have to load the bone, and we can do that from a loading perspective, which is obviously where weight training comes in. It actually tugs on the bone to make it stronger. So we get that with moderate to heavy rep ranges. Some studies show that you can do that with light rep ranges, but you have to do a hell of a lot of reps. So most women fall into the moderate, and then a good, so a good amount now are kind of getting into the heavy. So that's ideal. The second way we can do it is a collision force, or also known as a compression force, which is more the jumping movements. So that is what is going to build bone density far better than medication alone, although that can assist. But if you do, you can't replace, at this point in our history, we cannot replace strength training with anything, not with a pill, not with anything else. So we have to have that. The speed comes from moving the weight faster. Now you can kind of go into speed and power with some of the kettlebell swings. I mean, some things have a little bit of a crossover. I'm talking about like moving load fast and respond, like rebounding out of that from the bottom of a squat, or band assisted pull-ups where you're trying to lower down maybe more with control but then explode up, something like that. And we know that we lose speed and power, so all of the research will lead into that direction, that we lose speed and power first, then max strength, then hypertrophy. So that's why it's important to include a well-rounded program that's hitting all of those aspects. And again, you could go and just do a class, but I always say, and I'm not anti talking down any form of fitness. If
Sure.
somebody is going to crush it at F45, they have a community, they go with their best friend or their significant other, awesome. That's great. There's good, better, best. The
Right.
best way for me is that you are progressively overloading, because you don't have control over what that instructor, even if it is a kick-ass class, is doing. Was it more than the instructor did last time? Are you doing the same exact class? Probably not. So these are all things that have to kind of, uh, you have to play into. If women want, they if they want the best results, I'm telling you how to get the best results. You can get good results other ways, but if you want the best, that's how you do it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Um, I was thinking when you get into that, a couple things kind of popped in my mind that I've heard from women, and I'm curious, and I'm going to make maybe some assumptions, but I still want to ask and maybe bring it up for women out there that haven't, experienced your program yet. What about like pelvic floor, gut strengthening, midsection strengthening, things of that nature, prior to doing some form of plyometrics, jumping, etc. Like, how important is the core, pelvic floor, etcetera, especially, like, let's state the obvious, right? Like, especially women if and I would imagine, like, if they had a C-section or just, through giving, birth, I would imagine, a lot less, strength there, or things definitely change, quite a bit over time. What are some of the approaches specific to women? Probably not gonna see that as much as men, even though men need it a lot more than they realize. But I have heard that with, like, plows and jumping and even just, like, bladder control, even just with, like, basic plyometrics,
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm only 35 and I can't," or whatever, 40, 45, is there a big focus on that in those earlier phases as well? Is that a common thing that you see you have to strengthen before you can do some of those movements? How does that factor in?
I don't think it's necessary that you have, I mean, core is different than, I would say, pelvic floor, even though they're kind
Yeah.
of lumped together. Pelvic floor is a little bit harder to train. I'm working with someone on a program right now, but it's a lot of it is like internal work that a pelvic floor physical therapist would do. Obviously, you can't do that at home, so it's a little bit trickier. But
Sure.
there are different ways with like bladder control that there's a product called Bulkamid that a urologist or someone that is probably a urologist actually would be the best that can it's kind of like filler for your urethra. So it's that can help, but then also just vaginal estrogen if you're in that late 30s up to post meno, which is usually around 52, 53, that can help, or even after everyone most likely should be taking that for the majority of women, vaginal estrogen. So that can help too. What I see more often, even than those imbalances, because they're usually working, most women have a strong front core.
Mm,
Lateral core is usually a little bit weaker, but a strong front core. I see more women that jump into the plyometrics that then end up having some kind of tendinopathy in the lower body. And it's
mhm.
because they have not jumped since high school and
Yep.
they're jumping into it. And as we know, the muscles take months to build, tendons take almost a year, and bone takes a year or more, roughly speaking, in
Right.
those generic kind of categories. So the tendon and ligaments aren't a lot, they're not ready for the load and demand that are put on them. The
Yes.
muscle might be ready, but the tendon and ligaments are. So that's something else that I try to push with some jump drills and getting women ready. Again, you cannot just think you're going to go bust out some broad jumps or, box jumps and you're not going to have a calf tear, a calf pull or something like
Yeah.
that. Hamstring pull, plantar fasciitis, things like that that I'm like most of these issues are so preventable if
Yes.
women had the education. If they had the education. Now, I think hormone therapy goes along with that as well to help with the anti-inflammatory if you are starting in that perimenopause. Those go hand in hand. But I myself, I do all the things. I do all the programs and the foundations, and I still had this left shoulder that just 2 months ago started getting into frozen shoulder. And I'm super adamant. I can't afford to be out for 9 months with frozen shoulder. And even
Sure.
though I was doing all of the things, I went to I did a lot of massage, I did a lot of strengthening of the rotator cuff and everything else that maybe I'd neglected for a few months that I might just need more of. And then I went to physical therapy and did a lot of manual manipulation, and my shoulder is completely fine now. But that's just a testament that you can't gone are the days where I used to do this too in
Sure.
triathlon when I was like in my 20s and early 30s. I would always be like, "Ugh, just don't pay no mind to the hamstring. Yeah, the hamstring that's hurting, it will just go away.
Right.
Just
Right.
ignore it and it'll go away. And eventually it will stop. It doesn't work that way anymore. So it has to be strategic for sure.
Right. No, no, and I'm really glad you brought up the difference in, like, muscle versus tendon ligaments and the time it takes because, I see a lot of injuries or a lot of well-intended trainers or programs out there that just they're fun, they're high energy, and I feel like and again, maybe this is, painting with too broad of a brush, but, like, a lot of women, at least that I've interacted with, they like the breathing heavy, the high heart rate,
Mhm.
the like,
Yeah.
they have a hard what I've experienced at least, they have a hard time understanding regression before progression. Just like let's back that off. Let's not do the 3 foot high plyo box. Like let's work on this and that. I want to get into a little bit of what that looks like, your approach, your experience, but that you're 100% right. I've seen ruptured calves, Achilles, little tweaks, little injuries, little bit, and it's just so disheartening, especially for these women that, as we said earlier, they're putting everybody else ahead of themselves. Kids are finally in school, whatever the reason, they're giving themselves permission to finally take care of themselves for that little bit of time per week, and then they blow something, tear something, whatever. So it's got to be so like disheartening and just crushing. And I think again, that's why, I just stress to a lot of people, like you got to find someone like yourself who has a good progressive program and be patient with yourself and understand, like my wife, she's a college athlete, she's
Yeah.
late 40s now. And I have to remind her sometimes, like, honey, like, I know you want to get after it, but like, like we don't want to deal with the knee surgery again. And in her case,
Yeah.
it was a lot of she jumped in a lot of plyos and just structurally her hip to knee ratio, or the measurements, the
Doing
shearing
well.
forces are so much higher than like than myself, or like a male who's a little more straight. And I know some women have different, obviously we all have different body types, but specifically with hers, by not getting all those tendons, ligaments, and the proper glute activation firing in a more controlled setting, and then going and doing that,
Yeah.
she ended up having to have a knee surgery from it. And I know it just devastated her. And I felt so bad for her because she was really getting after it. And I know I'm being long-winded here, so I should get back on track. So my question was, like, how do you start with those plows? Are you doing like the low, like how to decelerate their weight, like jump off blocks? Are you doing things that, like, I'm a little rusty on that approach. Like how does one get introduced to that, and getting those, once you're out of the foundation phase, and now you're
Mhm.
in the early phases of like plyos, or getting used to body weight stuff, like what does that look like?
I have a 12-week jump drill program, but I mean,
Nice.
you could do a lot of just Googling it online if you wanted to just finagle something yourself. But I won't let women, or that's not true because I can't control what women do on my app. They can do whatever they want. If they buy into my any program, they can do it and I'm not there to say no. But I highly encourage and highly recommend, if you before you even start, you have 12 weeks of preliminary jumping drills, and it starts with pogo hops, front, back, side to side, single leg backwards, single leg side to side. All versions of that kind of what you would think of runners and track and
Yeah.
field stars would do.
Yep.
And then start adding like band assisted jumping and really controlling that and getting some explosive power that way. And then also adding in like the common weak links, which are usually the anterior tibialis, which is the front part of the shin. So if you get shin splints, or you used to get shin
Yeah.
splints, very common because we train the calf, but we don't train the opposing muscle, the anterior tib. So the calf also needs some strengthening. Both the soleus, which really can only be done on a seated calf machine or a Smith machine, where you can put your feet up onto a box so you can get that negative space. But calf stuff, and then also some hip flexor. So those drills are always peppered in as well, so that you're well rounded, and the feet stability and all of that. It all comes into play. It's not that you can't do this. It's that it's not right for you right now.
Right.
So if you build that up, otherwise there's, men need this too, but there's no ego in the weights room with these movements. There
Sure.
can't be,
Right.
because it's going to set you back for 6 to 9 months. And as females, especially postmenopausal women, you don't want to lose that's going to take you a year or longer to rebuild the bone and the muscles. So
Yep.
why? Just stay safe and build up, and then be able to do whatever you want.
Yeah, and I just another curiosity, because you mentioned earlier, are you doing things too for the foot, like with, shoes off, and just proprioception, or changing that, or shoes on, shoes off, whatever? Like, what does that look like? Because, and selfishly, partially, I'm asking for myself too, because I'm fortunate to have some well-educated friends too, because like it drove me nuts when I would just start. I'd have the cardio to run,
Mhm.
but my shins would be on fire. And I'm like, I thought I trained this enough, but it was like, no, no, 200, about 40 pounds. And even though I can run and the cardio's fine, my shins would give out just blazing. But anyways, so
Yeah.
I'm getting selfish now, but I think
Get
it
one of
still can help
those.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, get one of those anterior tibialis. It's those little
Yep.
tiny machine that you can do that, or you can do it with a kettlebell and just sit with your heel off of a stair and do those. So you're kind of doing that movement if people are watching video right now. Doing the training the anterior tibialis, but then also I always, and not every gym allows this. I just had someone in my Facebook group say, "I just got a warning for wearing
Taking my
socks."
shoes off. Yeah.
And so I'm like, you might want to get a minimal shoe. But if you can, and you can do some of these drills at home before you go to the gym. But
Sure.
I do a lot of, cable. You could do it with a band too, pull off presses with single leg pull off presses without shoes. Socks on, socks off, whatever, whatever the rules are, or whatever you can do at your house. A lot of stuff like that. Passing a dumbbell, one dumbbell on one leg, so that you're challenging
Yeah.
the foot stabilizers and all of that. It it's hard because we're in a solid shoe for the majority of our day.
Right.
Unless you're working from home and you're just kicking it in socks like I am right now. But a lot of women are in a shoe all day. So the foot stabilizers have to be trained often, but it's not like you have to devote a half an hour to it. It's just do it a few times a week. It takes maybe 5 minutes and just keep that up. Again, this all comes down to how much time do you have? What do you want to be able to do? And then how do you best support that so that you don't have these setbacks that will take significantly longer than when you were 20?
Yeah. No, it was interesting. Like a single leg RDL, I want to say for me was like with like 8 pounds or 10 pounds. But there's a PT locally here that's really smart guy, works a lot of athletes and such. And he had me focusing for me specifically, I guess, where my foot was driving almost all of the force through my big toe on a single leg because my glute medius on that side wasn't like firing, which was causing my lower back to hurt, which is, a whole chain of issues. And
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I just want to squat again. I know I'm a mess. Like, when I would squat, my back would get so inflamed. And he's like, looked at me for 30 seconds, like, yeah, I can tell you why. He's like, I can totally see it. But it started in the foot. And
Yeah.
like, fortunately, with, past education, even me knowing that, like having the foundation knowledge to that, it still was an aha moment. So I could
Mhm.
just to stress to those people who maybe are brilliant accountants or do other things in their life, like this stuff is really important. Even someone, like I said, who my entire adult life have been in the space,
Yeah.
still forget, and still I'm like, wow, like, okay, like that little tweak, and it just getting it firing before doing the training, it just feels so much better. It's just not only the progression over time, like you're describing, but even just like as a warm up.
Mhm.
And that's part of, I was kind of laughing when you're explaining some of it. I have a lot of young guys that'll come up to me like, "Hey man, like you're pretty jacked, like, but I haven't seen you touch a weight." I'm like, "Yeah, it's because I'm old." I'm like, "Yeah, you got to give me a half hour, bro. Like I'm over here, I'm warming up with bands and you know shoes off and body weight and doing my dynamic warm ups. I'm like, I look like a goofball, but I don't care. I'm like, I this is all I have no care in the world. I just recently, not to get too far off, but I just recently started using they're by Saga is the company. A buddy of mine's their lead educator for them, and the BFR, blood flow restriction therapy
Mhm.
cuffs.
Yeah.
I'm starting to use those in my warm ups, and he really turned me on to them. And I was going to use them just for like injury and recovery, and I'm using them in my warm ups. And he was just saying that,
Yeah.
without turning it into an episode about that, but it was just the amount of resistance, the how low of a load you can do with those restrictive. Have you ever had any
Yeah.
experience with that, or?
Yeah. So I
Oh,
used that when I was recovering from my knee surgery because
oh,
my
nice.
leg had pretty much all atrophied from
Yeah,
6 weeks of doing nothing. So that's also really good for women. I don't push it much only because I know the female brain and I don't want to be liable for it. But you need to know what's appropriate. Like go to a physical therapist and have someone teach you how to do it instead of just ordering something on Amazon and think that you're going to do blood flow restriction.
yep,
But really works really well for women with osteoarthritis because you don't have to lift as heavy.
right.
So I'm a big fan. Yes.
Yeah, no, that was a big thing that he mentioned was they have like training ebooks and like an app that restricts you for the percent of intensity because some people just are putting a band around them and just, and those are,
Yeah.
as he put it, those are the OGs that kind of like started doing it. But it's like now there's a whole technology and research and all that, like how to be safe,
Yeah.
contraindications, blood pressure, etc. Like don't do it if you have these issues. So there's a lot of precautionary stuff if you're getting it from a reputable source, like they are. But yeah, I just found it really interesting because I liked it, but until I just recently started using it, so I'm sure I'll be talking about it more because
Yeah.
um, I just yeah, like I knew the science, like had I shouldn't say no, but I had a general understanding of the science, but just we're all busy, right? It's like until you actually do it, and you're like, okay, yeah, I need to do more. So
Yeah.
yeah, speaking of doing more, I do want to take a quick moment here and just highlight your programs, what you do. I know we're probably coming up on time pretty soon. I know you have a lot going on. But I wanted to do a brief share screen here, if you don't mind, and maybe I can tell everybody. We'll have this in the show notes as well. But I wanted to talk a little bit about obviously where they can find you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I thought first maybe we could talk a little bit about your team and this. maybe you could tell us your thought process behind, if we start off, you have someone who is a PhD in registered nutritionist for you, um, sports medicine on your team, exercise physiology, sports nutrition, women's midlife health expert, and a clinical psychologist. Having this core group, like this group on your team, what's the approach there? How do they layer into your programs?
Yeah, so I pretty much can only talk to the strength and cardio portion. Can I talk to everything on this course? Absolutely. Am I the expert in it? No. Which is why I brought on these phenomenal experts. Abby Smith Ryan is really one of the leading female physiologists. She works at UNC Chapel Hill, and I think she's published over 112 papers now. So she's done a lot. She's doing a lot in the peri and postmenopause space now with female specific. So she is just a wealth of knowledge. She just was on Peter Attia. That podcast I think just launched earlier this week. Brilliant podcast if you want to listen to that. So she really talks about supplements and nutrient timing. Really is
Mm,
is those are her topics. Mickey Williden is the PhD sports nutritionist, and I don't know why I fall in love with these Aussies and the Kiwis, but she's a Kiwi too. So she's down by Stacy, and she's just brilliant. She's brilliant. She's willing to change her mind, which I love when new research comes out. There's no ego there, and she really breaks down what is different in midlife for midlife women. Not everything changes, but midlife women, if you are here listening this, you know that a lot of stuff also does.
mhm.
So, how do we apply that in a fat loss phase? How do we support our training sessions so that we're really fueling for the demand of our training sessions to get all of these goals out, but also change? This is a body composition changing course. It is not fast. It is not quick. Lose 20 pounds in, 6 days.
Right.
Not how I roll, not how midlife women should roll. So she really covers all of the nutrition. And then I just brought on Dr. Jocelyn Wittstein, who works at Duke. So she is an educator for Duke University, orthopedic surgeon, obviously. So she's doing surgery most of the time, but she is so good with bone health. So I absolutely love she's coming on to talk about bone health, injury prevention, and really just how we keep our bones and our bodies strong as we age, and what to do if you are in that category where you cannot jump or cannot lift heavy. How do we keep those bones strong? So that's a
Mhm.
really good education module that we have as well. Dr. Heather Hirsch she is the medical physician. So she covers all things hormone therapy and all of your questions there. She has a big personality and she's super fun to listen to. So that's where she comes in. And then Dr. Kimberly Mallet. So she has her PhD in behavior change. And so that's really important. It's the topic, honestly, that so when you come into this fat loss course, we have 17 education modules, and each of them will drop over the 9-week course. And then the expert comes on to talk about the modules that they're in charge of. So it's a lot of education, but I would say the one that is not as exciting, but equally as important as everything else is the behavior and habit change.
Yep.
If that doesn't change, everyone can lose weight, but how do you keep it off and how do you maintain that physique for the rest of your life? So that's what she's coming in to talk about. So it's really I it's fat loss specific. It's for women that want to change body composition and lose fat, keep lean muscle, if not build, but also want the education. So they want to know the why. So they're not always reaching out and having to hire a coach or, follow exactly what somebody else is saying. They know for themselves. So it's really empowering midlife course that is for only for midlife women. We talk about the challenges that they face, and I bring on those experts to answer all of their questions and educate them.
No, that's great. And then for those who are listening on audio, we were just pulling up Haley's Instagram and just kind of walking through some of the posts there, but we'll have all links in the show notes. But and then your link tree just to walk through that. So you have, I mean, membership is less than $1 a day, and some different workouts and your apps here. Can you tell everybody out there who's listening on audio too, just what you have your, so the Body Pod, that's your podcast?
Yes, the Body Pod is my podcast, and then I have a membership program that has over 40 workout plans in there, and then a bunch of webinars as well that I kind of explained earlier in the
Nice.
show. And that is that's the most cost effective if you
Mhm.
want a variety of programs. If you don't, there's a full stream that you can go down of Power Happens programs that are very similar to the programs I have in the membership, but they were a collaboration with Dr. Stacy Sims. And then I have a very, very, very beginner program with Dr. Vonda Wright that is called Start Strong. And that is for the novice female that has not been doing any strength training at all and needs a very, very basic program to follow. So, yeah, so those are my collaborations with the different experts that I work with, but I like to give people choices. So I have my group courses, but then I also have a membership. And then if somebody doesn't want the membership, cool, you have all of these Power Happens programs or the Start Strong program with Vonda Wright that offer something similar to a lot of the programs in there. So a lot of different ways that you can get programming there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and then, would you recommend people to check out, like, obviously the podcast, email list if they're just trying to learn more about, all right, there's a lot to choose from here, but I'm trying to figure out like which way to go. Is that a good place? Is there something to fill out on your website? Like what's the best ways that you see most people have a high success rate kind of getting plugged in with you?
Yeah, I have an entire team behind me. So I have a support team that is on. I have women that are working in Australia so that we hit kind of the different time zones, a female in Spain that is on the support team, so that we're really trying to cover a lot of the time zones there, as I'm a very much a global brand. They can answer anything. I do
Mm,
have an AI chatbot that we are updating so that it always has to be updated with any new
sure.
programs, but that can kind of answer some questions. I have a huge knowledge articles that you can go to, but mainly my support team is they're top notch. And I
Mhm.
always get positive feedback about them. So it's just a really good group of employees that can steer you in the right direction. And I have a lot of knowledge articles and then information on my social channels as well.
Oh, that's great. I wanted to just to round out some things. I thought maybe if we wrapped with a couple, uh, just your top few myths, maybe two or three myths in the women's health that you wish would either just die and go away, or what are the things that you're hearing a lot out there that maybe you can provide some clarity and direction on?
So I think the one of them is maybe this isn't a myth, but it's been a trend, and it is the over exercising, under fueling.
Mm,
Under fueling meaning under eating. So kind of getting this badge of honor for how long can I go and how little food can I get for the majority of the day to day of what I do. And that just doesn't support building muscle. It doesn't support building bone or even maintaining muscle and bone. So that is the conversation that it's it's not easy to turn a myth around or to turn this notion around that women are familiar with, but it's equally, I mean, there's a psychological component to that as well. So women might be like, "Yeah, I get it. My brain still doesn't want me to eat this much food." So that's where some of this behavior therapy comes into play.
mm,
I think that it's changing. I think that women want to be strong over skinny. I think that that is definitely shifting, but it's definitely still there. One of the others, obviously, is that I'm gonna get bulky, which we talked about, which is really hard to do. It's really hard for
sure.
midlife women to put on muscle. I always say, "Come look at my 50-year-old women lying on the floor after an hour session when I coach them and they're just trying to maintain their muscle or maybe even build a little bit.
Right.
You can do all of that in midlife, but it definitely is not as easy as it would have been in your teens and 20s for sure. So that changes. And then I would say this isn't a myth necessarily. I love the notion of lifting heavy, but there is a wider conversation to be had there. As I mentioned, we can't lift heavy if the stabilizers and the foundation is weak. So there has to be different phases and periods of training where there's different goals. And if you aren't someone that feels comfortable or can, for whatever reason, can't lift heavy, there's still a place for you in the weights room that can build bone and muscle and keep you safe. So there shouldn't be anyone that feels isolated out of this fitness movement that
Sure.
isn't going away.
Oh, that's great. I had one more I wanted to add and just get your encouragement and guidance on for women out there listening because I hear this come up a lot. So as you mentioned it, they were under eating. Now they're eating their body for the first maybe for the first time in many, many years is getting all the nutrient needs. Maybe they're using a creatine, and then now they're getting all these little minor micro tears in their muscles from strength training that are filling up with fluid, nutrients, and all this good stuff. Like I often use the analogy of like a steak, which is like big and rubbery and juicy and has all the nutrients and good stuff, versus a piece of beef jerky. Like that's going to break easy, not very efficient, blah, blah, blah. And so I try to explain it with people when they're thinking of the scale. So we know the scale in an early phase in a strength training program, generally speaking, is going to go up a little bit
Mhm.
first. And they're like, I was doing this for weight loss. I want to lose, like, what's going on? And it's like fat loss versus weight loss. Like, hold on, but how long could you provide some clarity of what's going on there? How long, you know, give some encouragement to stick through it? Cause that often happens a lot early too, where it's like, I'm using creatine, I'm getting the right protein, I'm hydrated well. All these good things are happening at the right balance of carbohydrates. So these muscles are getting nice and full of nutrients, glycogen, fluid, all this good stuff. But
Yeah.
those things come with weight. They weigh something.
Mhm.
And then you have obviously, throughout the month, different times and weight fluctuations as well. What is it you're seeing? Does that come up? How do you encourage women through that?
All
Yeah,
the time. And I think that there's an inflammation that happens if someone is newer to strength training and high intensity interval training. So that along with eating higher carbohydrate, which a lot of women have steered away from, is going to feel the muscle. So it's going to change the scale a little bit, but I think it all comes down to education and really focusing on what your goal is. And if the scale is triggering for you, don't use it at first.
sure.
Go by measurements because your thigh isn't all of a sudden just going to get large and then small the next day.
Right.
So you have to look at it and know that, or get some kind of body composition, which most women have a body composition scale or access to like an in body or something like that. Get some kind of documentation and then really just look at the lean mass. All the women want to look at body fat percentage, but I'm like, if you focus on the lean mass and you get the lean mass and you're not putting on a ton of weight, at first the scale might show a couple more pounds, as you mentioned, from inflammation, from more nutrients, from hydration, and then also from creatine usage. But it's everything outweighs what a couple of pounds on the scale is going to do.
Right.
So you have to see it through and you have to just be in for the long haul. I always tell people, I don't care where you are at the end of this 9-week course or this 6-week shred. I care where you are 9 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line. And if you just stick with something, a good program, stick with a good program, learn the basics about your nutrition and hang on to that, a lot of things I see it every single day. Can women, oh, women, it's so much harder to lose weight. It might be a little bit more tricky. Again, you can't do what you did in your 20s, but who
Sure.
cares? If you can find something and you can just have the longevity to stick with it and you're thinking of a lifetime, every time women after a year or 8 months, it's not a lot. I mean, you can see body fat changes, but muscle and really changing the physique usually takes a while. But all the time in my groups, unprovoked by me. I'm not asking these women to say anything
Right.
that will just go on there and be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think really anything was happening." it's like watching paint dry, but then all of a sudden I look at the 9 months, my clothes have been fitting better, but now I look in the mirror and I have this definition that I was longing for that I was never going to get from eating 500 calories and starving myself.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
yeah,
that's you mentioned it earlier too, but like if they do any kind of hormone replacement too, I didn't even put that into the formula. Like, yes, you have a lot of good growth agonists now that you're going to build more lean tissue, which does weigh something. So
yeah,
I appreciate you walking through that because I think it's definitely a pain point, especially if they have us, their male counterpart, is like, "Hey, I lost 12 pounds," or whatever. Like, it's just there's a whole nother discussion about why that happens and the differences, but it's just not getting wrapped into the scale and giving yourself time to reap those benefits as you're talking about. Like you said, it's not a let's fast and starve them and kill them with a bunch of high intensity stuff for 6 weeks just so that the scale looks better
yeah,
and then bounces all back, and the 20 you lost, you put 30 on. This is more that lifestyle, that progressive change that's really going to help women propel into those later lives and really living a more better kind of health span than if they didn't engage with a program like this. So
yeah.
no, I appreciate you coming on, and just kind of final wrap. Where can people find you just one last time, Haley? If what's a good place for people to follow your content and look you up?
Yeah, I'm Haley Happens Fitness on everything. So Instagram, my app is Haley Happens, Facebook, Haley Happens Fitness, and the my website is obviously that. So super easy, keeping it
There you
all the
go.
same. And yeah, there you go.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining us. For everybody out there on the listening in, be sure to send your comments, questions in. We'll do our best to answer, and the links will be in the show notes. But also, if you have a question specific, we'll be sure to point you in the right direction to connect with Haley and her team from there. So, thanks again, Haley, for joining us. Absolute
Thanks for
pleasure.
having
Appreciate
me.
you. So, thanks so much, guys. We'll see you.
Thank you.